your life, would you want to? Is Sergio de Santiago. Sergio comes from Madrid, Spain. Next is Inge Wolfsberg. Inge comes from Denmark. Then from right round the other side of the world, David Tin from Burma. David tells me that the Burmese are the Irish of the East. True, David? From Italy, Maria Pia Guasti. From France, Eric Lafont. And from Egypt, Nabil Yusri. Well, how about it, kids? What have you learned about yourself? Anything during these 3 months? How about you, Sergio?
Oh, yes. I learned a very good thing.
What was it?
Well, I learned that I can sit down on the stage in one very big auditorium with something like 1,500 kids in front of me, and I can talk very naturally. I can talk to them about many silly things and also very interesting things. And I couldn't do this before coming here.
You hadn't had experience as a public speaker before to such large groups of people?
I have had some experiences, but I had so much trouble to speak to them.
Well, after speaking 5 days a week here, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week in high schools over, what's the biggest audience you ever talked to?
I think I had 1,700.
1,700?
Yes.
Well, that's a lot for anybody, not only a 17-year-old. How about you, David, from Burma? Have you learned anything about yourself since you've been here?
Yes, Mrs. Waller. When I got here, I found that I'm very, very Burmese. I've got a very, very good sense of humor, and I didn't know that until I got here.
Well, now, what do you mean by that?
Well, I find that I'm different from the American students.
Well, I know one difference. I don't know whether this is sense of humor or not. I know you've had 5 birthday parties since you got here. But what else? You say you've learned you're very Burmese.
Yes, well, in Burma, we don't go out with girls. And I thought I was, well, a little Americanized while I was in Burma. But when I got here, I found that I was very, very different. I am different. And, well, I was in New Jersey when one of the teachers arranged a date for me. I didn't go. I thought it was too dangerous.
Well, speaking about girls, in my country, that is Egypt, first of all, the girl is very shy. Once you know her, she's a good companion. But up here, the first time you meet a girl, she's a companion. And she will stay always a companion. It's from the beginning up here.
I'm fascinated by your statement that the teacher arranged the date for you. I didn't know that the extracurricular activities went to that extent. Well, haven't you had any dates at all since you've been here?
No.
Why not?
I don't know. I don't feel like it.
You don't want to elaborate on that?
No.
How about the rest of you? Have you had dates here, Eric?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you come from France. Have you had dates here, Sergio?
I couldn't have. I think so.
Good. All right. We won't pursue that. I can see a certain reticence on this subject, but glad to know, David, that you didn't give up your Burmese customs. Let's talk for a minute about some of the changes, some of the things that are going on in your countries right now today, interesting changes that perhaps make you want to get back because you're very much part of them as young people. Anybody want to take that question? Maria, what are some of the things that are happening in Italy today that are especially interesting to us?
Well, I think one of the most important changes which happens in Italy today is the tendency of the government to go towards the left, to prevent communism, to try to give the people what the communists promised them. And, well, because, you know, communists in Italy have a very funny propaganda. They, instead of speaking about peace and war and so on, they only speak about amusement parks, about free tickets for dances and movies, and they have lots of festivals going around the country where they give lots to drink of the people, and then they give a little propaganda with it.
And the people always go. People were not very serious.
Oh, now, Eric, you can't quite draw that conclusion. But I was interested in your first remark that the government in Italy is going to the left because that is, I think you said, the best way to prevent communism.
Well, you know, in Italy there's always been a very strong left tendency, and always since Italy was formed. And even now that Communist Party exists, the tendency hasn't augmented. It's always the same amount of people which vote for the left. That's why the government tried to go a little to the left in order to prevent communism.
Have you heard people here who seem to think that communism is coming inevitably in Italy?
Oh, a lot of people.
How do you react to that one?
Well, I'm just telling them that now communism is much less dangerous than it was in 1948. For example, then we had communists in the key posts, in the army, in the police. Now we don't have them. They are no part in the government. All what they do is propaganda, especially between the farmers in the south.
I can imagine you sometimes felt we were giving it to the communists a little too easily, weren't you, and helping them
Yes.
thereby.
I think that giving so much importance to the communists, you help them.
You
That's
have
what
no
they
fears
want.
then about communists taking over in
No.
Italy. What's the situation in Burma, David? Tell us a little bit.
Well, I've left the country, Burma, 3 months ago, and I don't know what exactly going on in Burma, but most of the Americans are interested to know that the nationalist troops are fighting on our Burmese border now.
You mean the Chinese nationalist
That's
troops?
right.
I thought you'd gotten rid of them.
Well, we appealed to the United Nations, and they tried the best, and we got rid of a few thousand. About 10,000 are still there.
But where do you... I'm sorry, go ahead, Eric.
I want to ask Dave a question. What do you think would happen to Burma if Indochina was ruled by a communist party?
Well, there's nothing to be done. We can only hope that French Indochina will not be under the communists. And even if the Reds took over Indochina, we don't have anything to do. We just have to defend ourselves to the very last moment.
But don't you think that France and the United States shouldn't be the only one to support that war? That all the countries in the world, even if they did only a kind of symbol, would give something, one plane? Because we are not fighting for ourselves, we are fighting against an idea. And it's, I think, very unfair that only France and the United States should pay and support that war.
I gather Eric is implying, although he's been too polite to say so, that if Burma would be in danger, if the communists took over in Indochina, why aren't you helping the French in Indochina to prevent the Reds from advancing?
I don't mean much help, but just something that would show us that you appreciate what we are doing there, and that you don't behave like selfishness.
Well, that may be because of the Burmese nature we have. We mind our own business, and since Burma is a neutral country, I don't know if it's right to help you.
Well, in the world of nowadays, we can't mind our own business. I think that's a very old-fashioned view
Yeah,
of looking
that's
at things.
very old-fashioned, but we do.
Well, I think it's a bit funny when you hear Burma under any future invasion from Red China, and at the same time countries, some people say, why don't we accept Red China into the United Nations? Did you ever regard this question? If you ask me, I mean, Red China we would never accept in the United Nations.
Why not?
You see, American people living thousands of miles from Red China itself, if they accept it in the United Nations, that means the people like you would very easily accept it too.
No.
Don't you think so?
That's a different question. Accepting Red China into the United Nations and accepting communism.
Well, what does Red China represent? Doesn't it represent communism?
You can help a person, but even if you don't like the ideas, what he's doing.
Part of the difficulty I think that they're thinking of in Burma, here you are on the one hand supporting admission of Red China into the UN, and on the other hand trying to get rid of the nationalist Chinese troops that are there in Burma. I suppose it's not a contradiction in terms really, but I want to give, forgive me for going on from this point, but I want to give you a chance now to be able to tell us some of the things, interesting things that are going on in Egypt today.
Well, since the new regime came, and that is, the leader is Naguib and his 12 others, officers, the first thing
You mean since he came the second time or since he came
No, the first time.
All right, go ahead.
The first time he came over, first thing he did was abolish titles. You know, in Egypt, titles Pasha, Bey, and the man stands there and kisses your hand sometimes. So this is not socialism. First thing he did was abolish it. Next, land reclamation. The poor people who didn't have land and used to live outside in streets, in villages, he gave them the right of land, 5 acres each. But you can't give a man 5 acres and tell him just to go around and cultivate it. So he made some kind of security for them to loan them money, and in a matter of 20 years, let's say, this farmer will give back to the government the amount of money he took from them, and maybe even more, contributing for the country itself.
But now tell us about this revolution that got rid of Naguib and then...
Well, really, it's a very interesting point, but it's more deep than anybody could ever think. I'm an Egyptian myself. I've lived in Egypt. That's why I tell you that Naguib and his other man, Nasser, both of them are very good friends, really. Because I've lived in Egypt. I see how the public look towards each other, Naguib and Nasser. They have fought in the Palestine war with each other. They have, for 5 years, worked with each other underground until the king was exiled.
I looked at Eric a moment ago because being a Frenchman, coming from the French Revolution, knowing it in his history, I'm sure he's...
Yeah, I think a great progress has been made. When one of our leaders fell, they just cut their head off. And that was all.
This proves that the world is getting much better than before.
Well, if that's the interpretation, we're all glad of it. Let's go on now and ask, what have you learned about the United States since you've been here that you didn't know before you came? Inga, you haven't talked yet. You learned anything, or did you?
Oh, yes, I certainly have. But there's still, I learned very much, but there still is a question I don't quite understand, and I don't really know. I've tried to ask so many, but they couldn't answer me. You have got so many courses in your school for family relation and relationship to everybody, and just to developing your own personality. We haven't got anything like that in Denmark. And I don't think that the Danes, my friends at home, have got less personality than the American kids have. I know that you have got really a difficulty because you have to struggle to be an American, to be like all the other. And I know especially sometimes it irritates me a little bit when the girls, they dare not go alone. They dare not do one thing which everybody doesn't do. And if I told some of them, she was going with her books in her arms, and she was dragging them, and I took them, I'll carry them for you, I said, but why don't you use a briefcase, as you can see I do? It's much more practical. Oh, no, I do not do that, because nobody does it. Oh,
Well,
let's just follow the crowd.
All right.
Try to. I've seen up here during these 3 months that the American individual has a tendency to have his own personality. And then you can answer that question by finding that the American language is diverting from the English language completely.
But I think Inga's point now, Vio, was that Americans what she says, they tend to want to do what other Americans do, that they don't want to be different from the group. Do you agree with that, Eric?
Oh, I agree entirely. It's so strange for me, Frenchman.
Well, how have you seen it? Inga's example of the briefcase, I think, is a very good one, that high school girls wouldn't carry a briefcase because other girls didn't.
That's just the paradox. They want to have got their own personality, and they admire everybody who has got his own personality. That's just a paradox. And it's a difficulty because we can still develop our own personality because we need not think so much of being just like everybody else because everybody in Denmark is Danish. That's the difference in American.
And you mean everybody in America came from so many different backgrounds that they have to concentrate on being, well, that's a good point. Have to concentrate first on being like everybody else so they get integrated into citizenship. Did I cut you off a moment ago? Did you have another point?
No, I just agree with what Inga says, and I can't understand it. I've been brought up in such a different way.
Well, expand on that a little bit.
Well, in France, we don't have any relationship courses at school. We just go and listen, and we still are much more individual. We seem to have much more different interests. Maybe because we are a very old nation, so that everybody, because we have been united for a long time, wants to be different. Because here, everybody, it's a young nation. Everybody wants to be together because they come from different parts of the world. And
have the rest of you felt that American young people tend to resemble each other and want to resemble it? Yes, Sergio.
I would like to say that in Spain is just we are in the other end of the question. We have to fight against individualism in the schools. We have a very hard time in my school to get people to work together.
Well, now tell us some examples of people working together in schools that you've seen here that wouldn't happen in Spain, whereas you say they're...
For instance, in almost every, in every school there is a student council or a general organization or something like this. And in Spain it's very hard to have this because everybody wants to work for his own. In my school we have a general organization, a student council, and we have many troubles because of this. People don't want to cooperate. And we are trying to educate everybody to cooperate.
Well, for example, if you had a matter up in front of the student council and you had to decide it by vote, and would everybody agree to what the majority voted on, or?
Sometimes yes and sometimes no. It depends on the majority.
Have any of the rest of you felt that... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Sarah.
No, that's not.
Have any of the rest of you felt that there is more togetherness, more working together of the students here than you find in your countries?
Yes, much more, and not only in the students, I should say. But also in Italy, also in all the other organizations, there is always a great fight because it's just hard to put them to work together. You can see this in our political system, so many parties. Here they agree in two parties.
I remember on this subject, one of the first questions that one of you asked when you came together for the first time as a group, Ram from India asked, I always thought the essential fact of American life was competition. Now I'm beginning to wonder if it's cooperation. Yes, Inga?
Oh, I just sort of, I don't find that. In my school, we could work just as well together as Americans, and we do it a little bit more without learning it. The American kids, they learn it in school, and the teachers, they try to encourage them to work together, and they have so much of that. Our own cooperatives in Denmark, we have got many in many different places of the country, and they started not because the government wanted it, but it was some Danes, a few Danes who started these cooperatives.
The cooperatives?
Yes, we can do it ourselves. We need not learn it. But it is maybe because, just like Eric said, it's a very old country. We have been together for so many years.
Any other things ideas on this point of what you found out about the United States that you didn't know when you came here?
There's something that I can't understand. It's how a church can be for segregation. How can there be segregation in a church? It seems to me that it's the opposite of any religion. The idea of segregation, I think it's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard.
You're talking about segregation in the South in the churches?
Yeah.
I heard a highly placed American official say just the other day that doing away with segregation was going to come first in the churches, then in the schools in the South. But your point is certainly well taken, and no American would deny that this is a blot on our democracy. However, we're making progress. Any other points of things that you have learned about America? I'd like to ask you too. Yes, go ahead.
I didn't know they had such a strong sense of autocriticism.
Autocriticism?
Yes.
Ah, now go on.
Well, it's something which really struck me. I didn't expect it to be, and I like it because I like people who is great enough to be able to criticize it.
Is that your interpretation of it? The fact that people keep asking, what do you think about America? What do you think about us?
I sometimes thought when they asked me this question, maybe they are trying so many new things in America, and maybe they are a little bit afraid that they would fail in doing all these things. So they wanted to hear our opinion, us who come from outside America, and try to hear how we feel it is, and if we may think it would be right. I don't know if it's right, it's just a thought.
No, I don't think so. You go to a foreign land, and the first thing anybody asks you, even when anybody comes to my country, it's just natural to...
How do you like Egypt?
How do you like Egypt? How do you like Cairo?
Well, now, I'm sorry.
You said something about cooperation and competition, and Ram mentioned this before. Well, as a matter of fact, it's competition and cooperation at the same time.
I agree.
You can't have competition without cooperation, cooperation without competition. Companies compete to reach perfection, but when they reach perfection, they give the people their perfect examples, and that is cooperation with the people.
We'll have to get back on this subject with Ram. I want to know what he thinks. I like your answer, though, that America is both competition and cooperation, working side by side. I do want to ask you this other question because, although we don't like to think of it, you are going to start home on Sunday, Monday, and by Tuesday or Wednesday, all of you will be home again. One of the boys, who was talking to me? Was it you and Gunnar? No, it was Raja and Gunnar. Raja comes from Jordan and Gunnar from Norway, and they said to me the other day, within 3 days, Raja will be swimming in the nice warm sea, and Gunnar will be skiing again in Norway, while some of the others will be back in late summer and autumn. But let me ask you this. If you could live in the United States for the rest of your lives, would you want to?
May I answer?
Yes.
I think that if I had plenty of money, I wouldn't mind. But I think that in the United States, to be happy, you need money. In France, they look more if you are cultured or if you have a good education, and you can have a happier life without any money than here. Here, money is so important.
Of course, if you lived here, you'd have to speak English instead of French, too.
Oh, I hate English. Well, it's so unmusical.
Go on, tell me more.
Oh, I don't know, it's so harsh. And I think the main difference between the voice of the people here are much more shrill and hard than in France. And especially as a woman. As a woman, shout always. Look at the singers in America, they don't sing, they just shout.
The one thing I regret is that we can't hear you make a speech tomorrow in French instead of in English. I'm sure you're much more eloquent in French. We'll try to arrange a program next year where we can talk in French. How about you, Maria? Lots of Italians have come and settled down here for the rest of their lives. Would you like to?
Well, I should think I wouldn't like to get old here in this country. I see it more like a country of youth. I would like to spend perhaps my youth here, but not my old age.
Well, now, why wouldn't you want to spend your old age here? Why do you say that?
I don't know. I think because you need to have something to do here, to have a job, to have to rush. I don't know. You need to have something. You cannot just live, just enjoy life. Perhaps it's a wrong idea. That's the idea.
Don't you think old people here enjoy life as much as old people in your country?
I do. Because I've been once, I was in one of the community, I went to a Golden Age meeting club.
A Golden Age Club? Oh, have you seen that too, Sergio?
Oh, no.
Well, what was it? Tell me.
Oh, it was wonderful. You saw people were average 70 years old and enjoying themselves, and it was very funny. It was so strange for me. People 70 years old getting together, that's a contrast that what they would do in France. In France, they would stay by themselves and meditate on the life they have had.
There's one thing I noticed up
try
here
to be
too.
philosophical.
There's one thing I noticed up here too. Old people never give in.
No.
Find them going around in streets and even walking faster than I am.
You mean they never give up, you
never
mean?
give in to life or give up. It's better
Yeah,
give
they
up.
keep going on. They don't go and sit
Keep
home
going
by
on,
the
yeah.
fire and...
They never do that.
How does that compare with Burma, David? What do your old people do?
Well, no, in Burma, we take things easy, whether we are old or young. We don't mind.
Yes, David, we know.
That's the truth. Well, I wouldn't think of living in America even if I have the money, or whether I'm rich, poor, old, or young.
You wouldn't think of living here?
No.
Why not?
It's a very good country. It's very good to come visiting once a year or something. But not the question of living in America is very different. I won't think of living in this country. I've had enough of this country. 3 months I've been rushing around, and they think I'm taking things too easy here.
I've heard from some of your host families that it's very difficult for you to get up for breakfast or be to school on time.
Well, that's right. I couldn't help it. That's the Burmese in me. I can't control it.
What are you going to do when you get home? What's the first thing you're going to do?
I think I'll sleep for 7 days.
How about you, Inga? Would you like to live here the rest of your life if you could?
No, not the rest of my life. Maybe about 10 years, and I would be very happy here if I knew that I could come home. Then I could live very happy. That I have discovered since I came and learned about myself that when I came I was very, very Danish, and I'm very Danish still, but now I know that I can be just as happy in America as I could in Denmark, and I didn't know that.
I agree. It's not the place where you live, but the inner world you have and you carry with you, which is much more important.
That's right.
How about you? Would you like to leave Egypt and come and live in the United States the rest of your life?
It's natural to live in your country. Everybody is to his own taste. Travel east, travel west. After all, home is best. But then, the United States has its own advantages. There's just one disadvantage that I have found, just to speak. And that is non-sentimentality up here.
A lack of sentimentality in
A lack of
America. No,
sentimentality.
dear.
Well,
All right, tell us what you mean.
Well, maybe the New York skyline. If there was an oil gusher under it, they would just abolish the New York skyline to get more profit from the oil gusher.
Well, they would build on the skyline somewhere else.
Well, something else, maybe.
No, I don't agree with
At
you.
war. Attention, please. There comes a television show. Attention, please. Aeroplanes fail or something like that. And after that, there's a show of dancing and things that people forget completely. Well, maybe this is something I've found different from my country.
I don't agree. I think American people are awfully sentimental. Look, the way they look at their past, the way they try to create a past that they haven't got. And they love so much the little past they have. And I don't know, it seems to me very sentimental, that kind of...
We haven't, excuse me, Eric, we haven't got Sergio's question yet. Now, as a Spaniard, would you like to live in the United States the rest of your life or not?
Well, I think I could live in the United States, but I want to live in Spain because I want to work for Spain.
What do you want to do, Sergio?
I want to be an engineer, and we need a lot of work in this field now in Spain. We are trying to get together with the other countries in Europe, and we have a lot of work to do, and I want to help all the other Spaniards. so I want to live in Spain.
By the way,
Yes?
the history of Spain hasn't been in connection with the history of Europe for a long time in the past, in the near past. Can you say something about that?
Well, I think you are right. We haven't been apart from other countries in Europe especially. And I don't know if it is our fault or it is the European countries' fault. Thanks God now we are getting into contact with many countries in Europe, and we are showing the people that we also want to cooperate, we also want to help them.
I think that's a good note to end it on, Sergio. We're all glad that Spain is getting back into the European community again. If there's one thing I am happy about above all is that you're still asking questions. That's all the forum has tried to do. It hasn't tried to give you any answers, but as long as you keep on asking questions, that's the goal. I'm afraid our time is up.